Hey everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today we are going to make a hair moisturizer using a cold process emulsifier. The cold process emulsifier in which I'm using is called G-Spurs Iced Tea CPS. It's available at Windy Point. I do believe Making Cosmetics has it, but I could be wrong. If you go on to Windy Point Soap in Canada, you can check out the INKI and CAS number and compare it to options that Making Cosmetics has. This particular cold press emulsifier is made up of cetyl alcohol, benzalkonium chloride, and polyquaternium 37. Now, I do gently warm my water phase when using this. You don't need to, but the reason I do that is just because it makes it so much easier for the powder to dissolve without clumping. So I'm gonna go in and add my humectants. I am making a 400 gram batch. The only thing in my bowl right now is water. So I'm gonna go ahead and add some glycerin. As well as some propylene glycol. And then I'm using the liquid version of panthenol. I love using the liquid version. It just makes life easier. However, if you don't have it, by all means, go ahead with your powdered. You would want to slightly adjust the percentage. And then I will be using polyquaternium. I'm using Polyquat 7. And then centrimonium chloride. Now, you'll notice most of my materials have been purchased in Canada because I'm in Canada. However, these are very common raw materials, and all of them are available in the US. The only one that is questionable is the emulsifier. However, I'm like 95% sure that Making Cosmetics has it. They just use different names. Different suppliers, unfortunately, like to make our life more confusing than it has to be, and they rename materials. So sometimes one supplier has it named as one thing, and another supplier has it named as something else. This is why it's really important to cross-check your INKIs and your CAS numbers. And the reason the CAS number is so important to check is because materials that have the same INKI can result in very different final products. Why is that? When you're thinking, well, the ingredient list is the same, why would my my product turn out any different. And I'm going to explain why. I have gone over it in other videos, but I know not everybody watches every single video. Materials, particularly emulsifiers, are generally, or all-in-one emulsifiers, are generally made up of more than one material. So, for example, I'm going to do something really easy. This is made up off the top of my head just to kind of explain it better. Say we had a material that was made up of benzimonium chloride and cetyl alcohol, just two materials. Say one manufacturer made it with 50% benzimonium chloride and 50% cetyl alcohol, where another supplier could use, say, 20% cetyl alcohol and 80% benzimonium chloride. Again, this is a made-up material. Don't say, Kenise, that doesn't exist. It's made up. So, two identical materials used at very different percentages will yield very different final product results. This is where your CAS numbers become really important, because your CAS number will let you know if a material really is identical to the one in which I'm using. So I'm adding marshmallow root or marshmallow root powder here. It is a phenomenal natural detangler. And this is, while it's a hair moisturizer, it is also being used as a detangler. At least that's what I'm using it for. Okay, so now we just need to get our preservative in there. I've chosen Liquid Germal Plus. I often do my videos with Liquid Germal Plus because it's available worldwide. It also has a really high pH, or sorry, really high, a really wide pH range in which it works in. So it makes it really easy for people who don't have great pH meters to still make some wonderfully preserved products. Okay, so we've got all of our water-soluble materials in there. We're going to go ahead and give it a nice stir. Okay, so at this point, you could go ahead and just add in your emulsifier. However, as mentioned before, I am going to go ahead and heat this material gently, not to any specific temperature. It's just to make this powdered cold process emulsifier dissolve much nicer than it would without it. So we're going to put this on our hot plate and let it heat up. Again, don't worry, you don't need a thermometer right now for this. It's just to get that powder dissolved really beautifully. And while that's warming up, I am going to choose a fragrance for this. Now, this particular moisturizer I am making for my son, who has 4B hair and a lot of it. We are going through and combing it out before we put some twists in his hair. And I just wanted to make something that would make that comb up process as unpainful as possible. For those of you that have that hair texture, you know that it is absolutely gorgeous, but can hurt during detangling if you don't have a really nice product to help with the tangles. Oh dear, what fragrance should I choose? I'm actually gonna go into my other cupboard, so I'm gonna pause this just for a moment. Okay, this has warmed up quite a bit. I've chosen, which I will share with you guys, or actually I didn't choose it, my son chose it. My favorite, I'm a big coconut person. I struggle with a lot of fragrances. This is me adding the emulsifier. I struggle with a lot of fragrances. Floral fragrances give me a terrible headache. I love tropical stuff. I was raised in a Jamaican home, so I think that's probably why I love tropical fragrances so much. This particular coconut scent from Fizzy Fairy is the best I've personally ever tried. I absolutely love it. Okay, so you can see there's still some clumps in there. I'm gonna go ahead and use my, and you will notice with this cold process emulsifier, you do need to use your stick blender. You'll notice a huge difference in viscosity if you try to hand mix. You shouldn't be hand mixing emulsions anyways, because they need high shear to form a stable emulsion. The only time that changes is if you've got a shear sensitive material in there. In this case, we don't. So we're gonna go ahead and use some high shear on this. You will notice in some of my videos, I do stir with a spatula, with a whisk, and that is when I am doing what is referred to as a pilot batch, which is 400 grams and under. You can get away with a whisk. However, when you're upscaling, you can't. Your emulsion will separate, okay? Now you will notice there is a lot of bubbles in this. Now there's a couple reasons for that. One, immersion blenders do create bubbles when you are making an emulsification. That's just air is really what it is. You've got to remember emulsifiers have the same chemical backbone as surfactants do. They've got an oil-loving head and a water-loving head. They can create what's referred to as microfoam. However, when air is trapped inside, that is what gives you those bubbles. The other thing that would cause bubbles here is that I've got centrimonium chloride in here. Now, these will go away. Like once it's settled for a little while, they will disappear. Most of them to the point that you would not notice them in a product. I wanted this particular product to be really easy to run through the very, very tight curls of my son's hair. Okay. Now, when you're using your immersion blenders, and when you're purchasing, don't buy an expensive one. You don't need an expensive one. I have a $15 one that I still got here that works beautifully. It's white. I'll show it to you guys since it's white. I just have a tiny little stain on it from making a brown colored hair gel. It works beautifully still. This one was $30 Canadian on Amazon. It came with 2 other attachments, which I do use for other parts of formulating. You don't need an expensive blender. What you do need to do is rest the motor of your blender. If you want it to last a long time, stick blend for 30 seconds, rest it for 5, and your immersion blender will last you years. I blew through a ton of them before I learned that. And every time I replaced it, I bought a more expensive one, thinking that the problem was that I was just cheap and I like to buy inexpensive things. That was not the issue. It was that the immersion blender just needed to rest. So just to keep that in mind. The only thing that I would splurge on is if you're making larger batches and you want an immersion blender with a longer neck so that it can go into a deeper beaker. Now I do have a homogenizer as well, which I absolutely love. I don't use it in my videos because I don't want anyone to think that you need one to get started. You don't need to buy a homogenizer to start making cosmetics at home. Okay, so we've got a beautiful product here. Now, keep in mind, this will thicken more. Remember, I warmed the water a little bit. So once that cools, it is going to thicken further. Now, I haven't added anything yet that makes this an emulsion. We've got all water-soluble ingredients in here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my lipid phase, which consists in this case, now again, this could be customized. This is what I've chosen and what works well for the particular product I am making. I'm using dimethicone today, and I am also using fragrance. So, Caribbean Coconut by Fizzy Fairy. If you like coconut and you want an authentic coconut fragrance, this is what you need. Now, this is, unfortunately, there we go. There we go. Okay. I use pipettes for my fragrance. Actually for more than just my fragrance, but we'll get into that in a different video. Okay, so we've got that in there. And now let's add our dimethicone 350 is what I'm using today. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and use my stick blender again because it, because I want this to emulsify really nicely into my water-soluble materials. So rest. Now, I want to just touch briefly on speed of your blender. This particular one doesn't have multiple speed choices. If yours does, always start on low and emulsify first on low, or stick blend first on low, and then you can up your speed to high. You will create a thicker product doing it that way. Two, you won't end up splattering your product everywhere by just, you know, putting really high force into a very liquidy product. So just a couple little tips. By all means, you're free to do whatever you want. I'm not trying to boss you guys around. I'm just giving you guys some tips I've learned along the way. Okay. Now, keep in mind, this will thicken when it's fully cooled. Any emulsion, actually pretty much any product, but any emulsion, let's just stick to emulsions so I don't confuse anybody, will thicken over 24 to 36 hours, but definitely 24 for all of them. You will have a much different viscosity product the next day. So if you're making any adjustments to your formula, always make sure to wait that 24 hours. Now, I mean, in some cases when you're formulating something new and, you know, you finish it, you think this is way off from what I want, then by all means go back in and make some adjustments and remake it. But if, you know, if it's not too far off from what you want, wait those 24 hours, okay? And there we have it. We've got a really nice detangler that will also provide my little guy with a bunch of moisture in his hair, which he not only needs, but benefits him greatly, and we won't have a whole bunch of tears when we are combing out his hair. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and happy formulating.